brought to you by Eurogench TV and Canal Sim. Today we're very privileged to be joined by former leader of the Labour Party and independent MP for Islington North, Jeremy Corbyn, and Gale MEP for Cyprus, Professor Niyazi Kizilyurek. They'll both be joining me from their respective offices, and we also have a brief recorded message from Roger Gale, Conservative MP for Thanet North and chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Cyprus. Thank you for joining us. Perhaps we'd like to start by playing Roger Gale's brief message for us, and then we can go into our in-depth discussion. We'll see what the...
I've been involved in the Cypriot issue for the best part of the whole of my 37 years in the House of Commons. And for all of those 37 years, there has been a wholly illegal army of occupation in the northern half of the island. It is completely unacceptable for a member state of the Council of Europe, Turkey, to occupy territory belonging to another member state of the Council of Europe, Cyprus. They have no business having soldiers on the island at all. And I know from my Turkish Cypriot friends, and I have many, as well as from my Greek Cypriot friends, that this is completely unacceptable to both sides of the divide, a divide that shouldn't actually be a divide at all. So with the talks about to start again, I now want to see, and my friends in the House of Commons want to see, a real effort to secure the bizonal, bicommunal federation that the legal governments are committed to, and that we believe is achievable with goodwill. If we can do that, then Cyprus can become a united island again. Friends from both sides of the island can meet, live together, work together, and enjoy each other's company again. And it will make a tremendous contribution towards peace in a very dangerous part of the world, the Middle East.
The statement from Roger Gale. Sadly, he didn't join us to give us a greater in-depth look. So I'd like to start by asking Jeremy Corbyn for his comments, for what he thinks would be an ethical foreign policy approach to the talks, what your views and aspirations are, and whether you do think that a settlement, a bizonal, bifederal settlement, is achievable.
Thank you, and thank you for arranging this program this evening and this discussion that we're going to be having tonight, because I think it's important and timely. I would acknowledge that Roger Gale has been in Parliament the same length of time as me and has always taken a very consistent line on Cyprus about the need for reunification, and indeed I'm also a member of the Council of Europe, and he does raise the issue frequently there, and so it's a shame he can't be with us for this discussion this evening, because I think he would bring a great deal to it. The background to it all is, of course, the terms of Cypriot independence in 1960, when Britain was a guarantor power of the island. This was coming out of all the issues surrounding AOKA B rising and the fighting that went on in Cyprus and the very large deployment of British troops before that. And the constitution was constructed around the idea of a voice for both communities in government at all times. Sadly, this broke apart in 1974 with the occupation of the northern part of Cyprus by Turkish forces and the partition that's gone on ever since then. I represent an inner London constituency in North London. We have a substantial Cypriot population, mainly Greek Cypriot, but a considerable number of Turkish Cypriots also. And before that, I was a councillor in the borough of Haringey, representing the Haringey Ladder area, which has an enormous Cypriot population. And I was a councillor during the time of the occupation, and large numbers of Cypriots came to London, which they were perfectly entitled to do, and have stayed ever since and made an incredible contribution to our society. But having talked to many over many, many years, the pain they feel at what happened in 1974 and the need for reunification. And it's not just me saying that, it's not just the Cypriot community saying that. That's endorsed by the United Nations, it's endorsed by the European Union, it's endorsed by the Council of Europe, and it is fundamentally the policy of my party to support a reunification strategy that gives respect to both sides. There was the Annan Plan, which was about bringing about reunification, and there was a referendum held simultaneously on both parts of the island. And if somebody had said to me years before there's going to be a referendum and it's the southern part that will vote no and the northern part that will vote yes, I would have looked at them slightly odd and said, no, it'll be the other way around. It wasn't. And it was because of the incomplete nature of the Annan Plan as much as anything else, which I'm sure other colleagues will speak of later on this evening. There is two factors that are renewed impetus towards bringing about rapid talks at the present time on a bizonal, bicommunal approach to the future of the island. The island is too small to be divided. It is a beautiful island with a beautiful symmetry, and it should be one. And the two impetuses are this. Firstly, the danger of a dispute over oil drilling rights, gas exploration rights in the sea surrounding Cyprus, and what happens with that. And secondly, the views taken by President Erdogan that he now seems to be countenancing a total partition of the island into two states. At the moment, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus is not recognised by anyone except Turkey, and the UN recognises the Republic of Cyprus as one, albeit part of it under occupation. Surely this is not a time for building up bellicose talk. It's a time for actually diplomacy and negotiation in order to bring about that bizonal, and I stress bizonal, bicommunal, and I stress that equally, approach to it. It cannot be one side having supremacy over the other. It has to be a shared endeavour on one island for a shared future. And so I think this is the opportunity to develop that. And I think our discussion this evening may, if it in any way helps to develop that, then it will. I fought two general elections to lead the Labour Party. Obviously, we'd hoped to go into government. And I was very, very clear that our role in government would have been to accept our responsibility as a guarantor power, but also accept our responsibility as the designated Security Council member to draft an appropriate Security Council position which would ensure these negotiations and these talks actually took place. And I think the British government has been dilatory in this. They haven't moved rapidly enough or fast enough, despite considerable amount of pressure in the House of Commons to try to bring about a long-term peaceful solution. So I'll stop there if I may, so we can hear from other colleagues and then continue the discussion. But thank you very much for inviting me onto this programme this evening.
Thank you, Jeremy. Niyazi, would you like to comment on what your views and aspirations are for the coming talks, and whether we've made any progress since Crans-Montana? Has there been any progress behind the scenes? What do you see happening in the talks this time?
Yeah, thank you very much, Alev. Thank you very much for the organizers for this very meaningful debate we are having now. Allow me first to give a small introduction. Maybe why do we discuss on a federal state in Cyprus? What makes Cyprus today to discuss federal state and not other models of states? I mean, first of all, I want to emphasize that federalism debate in Cyprus is not just about how a state arranges its administrative structure. It's not that. It is related directly to state building, conflict resolution, and integration of a society. The roots of necessity of a federal state lies at the very core of the inter-ethnic relations and in the recent history of Cyprus. In Cyprus, there is not one dominant majority and a submitted minority. Relations of two communities is one of political equality, which is endorsed in the Constitution of 1960. Another dimension which brings federalism as a perspective to Cypriots is the failed past attempts for domination, failed attempts for legally separation. So actually, it is in this context of multiple failures that federal state emerges as a perspective. It is a state model which can set an end to domination and separation aims. Given that domination and separation tendencies were the main reasons for the ethnic conflict in Cyprus, federal state comes as a tool for conflict resolution. The two level of government of federalism makes it possible for the communities to rule themselves and to rule the whole country at the same time together. Ethnic identity of each community is preserved, and at the same time, they create a common community of citizens. If we look closer, we're going to see a lot of common interest of Greek and Turkish Cypriots in a federal Cyprus. I can name a few. Expectations of stronger economic ties and associated benefits, territorial considerations, geographical reality, multiplicity of range of communications and transactions, to secure Cyprus as a homeland to all its citizens. These are some of the common interests that we have. There are also interests about the perceived threats, real or perceived threats. For example, a sense of military insecurity, real or imagined, a perceived threat to the stability of existing political order or status quo, a sense of economic insecurity, real or imagination. All these are the political, social, economic motivations for common good for both communities in a federal state. And of course, we have to add to these facts some other facts, such as that since 1974 and afterwards, the whole UN resolutions, proposals, ideas, even plans, were to talk about the federal unity in Cyprus, a bizonal, bicommunal federal state based on political equality of two communities. To that, we can add the high-level agreements signed by two sides over years, starting by Denktaş Makar until Akıncı. So we have such a key, we have such a great sum of ideas, proposals to arrive at a federal unity in Cyprus. Now, are we close enough to this? Alev, that was your question. Are we making progress? Unfortunately, today we are less fortunate than some months ago because, first of all, Turkish Cypriot side has radically shifted from federal solution to a two-state solution or to confederalism. And of course, there is another dimension, which is not enough willpower by Greek Cypriots to accept the political equality as a partisan of territories in all federal lands. So to my mind, the distance today is bigger than before. Now, given that the situation is like this, let us discuss are the options, realistic options, when we talk about a state in Cyprus, or states in Cyprus. First, say one thing. Confederalism is not a state. Confederalism is an agreement between sovereign and independent states to have some cooperation at certain levels which they consider important for them. Now, we don't have two states in Cyprus. We don't have two separate sovereign states in Cyprus so that they can talk about confederalism. It is totally foundless. There is no foundation, no legal foundation to discuss for a confederalism, given that Cyprus, or to add to that, Cyprus is a member of EU, and you cannot have a confederal structure within the European Union, which already don't in federal element structures. The second option would be a unitary state in Cyprus. That would mean that the ethnically majority group can rule the island and the rest turns into a minority. Anyone, any student or recent history of Cyprus, and all Cypriots know very well that this is totally unacceptable for the Turkish Cypriots to be reduced to a minority category, a community which the whole recent history thought for being politically equal with the Greek Cypriots. So talking also from historical perspective of political current affairs, all this lead us to a federal model of state and not anything else. No unitary state, no confederalism. Now, given that reality, that may be a reality, but on the other hand, there is also ideologies, ambitions. It is, I think, one of the very nice description of Karl Marx. It's not good enough that reality approaches the ideology should also approach reality. And I think here at that level, we have serious problems. We have problems at the level of political culture. And unfortunately, we are trying to build a federal state without integrating federalist culture in our political culture. Still, nationalism is dominated in our political discourses, and you can hardly arrive at federal state if you get stuck in nationalist ambitions. So at that level, I would say Cyprus, to make progress, needs help from the international community. And especially, I would emphasize the role of EU, because it is not acceptable also for the EU to unite a continent and have a small divided country as a member of the EU. So I will leave it at that, and we'll come back to the discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Niyazi. As you're both aware, this programme is going out to Northern Cyprus, and it's going out on a channel that has largely supported a federal solution. So although you, Jeremy, were surprised that it was Turkish Cypriots who wanted a bizonal settlement, well, these talks have been going on since 1968. I mean, I think that is, Niyazi, you can correct me, but is it 1968 is the first time we have talks for a bizonal bi-federal solution? And
well, it's not exactly the first time there's been talks, but I was surprised by the result. Sorry?
Federal was proposed in 1968. Was certainly, if it wasn't the first, it was the one that I remember as a little girl. So how do we get the Turkish Cypriot electorate? I think have been really disenchanted by both the rejection of their abandonment by Europe, having voted for a settlement, being part of Europe, being citizens of Europe, and yet, for instance, at the moment, having a closed border and not being able to do anything. So I think, as well as a lot of other pressures, there has been a sense of frustration, especially around the last talks. I mean, the former leader of the Turkish Cypriots, president of the unrecognized state, Akıncı, fought very hard and in a very heartfelt way for a federal solution. Why do you think that failed so much? I mean, in such a spectacular way. Why was Montana such a failure?
It's true he fought very hard to get a federal settlement, and I recognise there is a very large body of opinion amongst the Turkish community in northern Cyprus that wants a settlement, that wants a bizonal settlement. I recognise that.
Can I just correct
Sadly,
you? The Turkish community in Cyprus tends to vote either for Turkish settler parties or have voted for the current leader. But it's the Turkish-speaking Cypriots who have been supporting the federal solution in northern Cyprus. Carry.
yes, and I hope that they will continue to do that, and I hope others would recognise that surely it would be much better to live on an island you could freely travel around rather than one that's divided, but also recognise that for decades people have been trying to build relationships in both communities with some success. And so attitudes have changed quite a lot on the ground, hence the vote at the end of the Annan plan, but also the fact that governments have been elected in northern Cyprus that have been in favour of reunification. But you have to address the insecurities with this, and those are insecurities over property in 1974, and the reopening of the resort is part of it as well. So I think we do need to recognise you've got to bring about a sense of security of people in order to complete that process. But I do think that President Erdogan's are very much not helpful in this, because they tend to exacerbate the divide rather than bring about the possibility of unification. He must know that Turkey is the only country that recognises Northern Cyprus as a state. Nowhere else does. That isn't going to change anytime soon, if at all. The UN Security Council is quite clear about its resolutions, so as is the European Union. Britain has responsibility in this as the former colonial power, but also, crucially, being a guarantor of the 1960 independence agreement that was made at that time.
Niyazi, can I ask you to comment on how we make progress after and how we address this lack of willpower and political culture in the Republic, how we address this sense of security issue for both communities, but also maybe again to talk about this the opening, well, or this show of opening Varosha. How do you think that completely blows the talks out of the water?
First of all, let me say that it is true that we have been negotiating now for decades. But it is not so that we didn't achieve or arrive anywhere. It is also a fact that there are a lot of common understandings on both sides on many issues. I mean, on territorial adjustment or property issues, governance. You know, we made big progresses, and these progresses are written down, and the UN knows this. We came very close to a comprehensive settlement just a few years ago in Tramontana. So it is not like that it's a tabula rasa and nothing has achieved. There are actually serious achievements, and we have to build upon them. We are very close to solve very important issues, starting by governance, property, territorial adjustments. So we saw maps presented, we have ideas presented. So let's look into this. Why on earth, although there is such a key of a common understanding, and we are very close to make a comprehensive settlement, what obstructs this last, as Antonio Guterres very wisely said, why don't we run with last mile and finish this? I mean, that is a big question, of course, when it comes to this. Now, Jeremy Corbyn underlined President Erdogan two-state solution, of course, which is not a flyer, cannot help to anything. But I am not sure if that is the last word of, or last position of Turkey, or final position of Turkey on Cyprus conflict. Because we have been seeing a Turkey from time to time to talk about two-state solution, and then again, after some bargaining, this has been changed. I mean, there are very clear examples that, for example, 1997, Turkey declared first time that wants two-state federalism officially, because was reduced to be a member eligible to become a full member of EU. But then at Helsinki summit, this has changed and Turkey became a candidate. Then again, Turkish position has changed. I am sure Turkey is making a bargaining around Cyprus conflict, also with EU, and maybe also gas issues. So I wouldn't say that Turkey's last word is two-state and nothing else. So we should be ready for some surprises. Maybe not at this 5+1 meeting, but maybe another momentum, which Turkey will judge is proper. Now, to come back to the original question, although we have some progress at negotiations, there is not a political readiness to complete this business. I think political elites and societies, communities, have been, there is a gap between elites and society. When it comes to a federal set, president or leader or really made an effort to explain to Cypriot citizens, Greek and Turkish Cypriots, what is a federal state, how it works a federal state, what are the benefits of a federal state. So there is a kind of always hesitant, and in a way we are defending federalism not as a perspective, but as often Greek Cypriots are presenting it, as a painful compromise. And when you talk about federal settlement as a painful compromise, that is very difficult to convince the citizens of Greek Cypriots. Why should we do a very painful compromise? We should change our regard, our look. We have to look to federalism at a perspective which brings communities together, which also is island, and we can build a common future. So I think, as I said, I mean, at elites level, we didn't do a good job to reach the citizens. Another maybe important thing is that there are, civil society activities, there are bicommunal groups really trying very hard to cooperate. But don't forget that until 2003, it was not possible to cross the barricades. I mean, two communities have been apart, physically apart, until actually recently. Now, there is a kind of more activities, and we see many bicommunal groups coming together at different levels of life, from music to sports, trying to do things. Here, actually, I would expect leaders to do much more to promote this kind of togetherness, to promote in everyday life, bringing both communities together. I mean, one thing is to negotiate a federal settlement at level of leaders. Another thing is to bring citizens to deal certain issues, such as, for example, that.
Cut out. Could you just repeat? Sorry, because we
I'm
lost you a
finishing.
bit.
So it's an ongoing struggle. Definitely, the political elites should put more effort into this, should open ways for cooperation of two communities. We should maybe review our education system even, which I'm very unhappy to see how we teach in our schools, for example, in both Greek and Turkish Cypriot schools. Definitely we do not create a common sense for peaceful coexistence. So there are many things we have to review.
Why is Europe not playing a more active part in this, and how can it, Niyazi? Because, as you know, the school books in Greece are actually, in the Greek Cypriot school books are actually racist, incorrect, as are the Turkish Cypriot school books, but that's in the occupied illegal zone. I mean, how can we have a European country where children are taken to see horrible, violent things as part of their education, who are taught to hate? This is quite a problem, and Europe has a big responsibility here, as you say. And then,
well, Alev, let me tell you one thing, that I am sitting in the Cultural Education Committee of European Parliament. I am the coordinator of the left group there. But cultural education still is under the jurisdiction of nation states. It's not a jurisdiction of Brussels. Europe can give some guidelines. Of course, anti-racism, anti-xenophobia, living together, gender equality, etc. But it's actually national governments who has to implement. We have a last word, because it's, as I said, is under the jurisdictions of the nation states. It is the job of Cypriots to reform their system of education, So we don't do enough. On the other hand, we can talk as a separate chapter, if you want, later, about the role of the EU in search of solution later on, maybe, yeah.
Thank you. Jeremy, I'd like to ask you what you think Britain's responsibility as a guarantor power, and given that there are actually as many Cypriots living, probably as many Cypriots living in England as there are in Cyprus, what role do you think Britain should be playing in peace building? Because Niyazi talked about peace building, and we do have activists in Cyprus, but as you probably know, when there were protests against the closing of the border last March, there were water cannons and police were used, and the border has been shut. What can England do? What can Britain do?
Well, you're quite right that Britain is a guarantor power. You're quite right that Britain has not been as involved as I think it should have been from the very beginning. And it's unusual circumstance that now Britain also has this preeminent role at the UN as well. And so I think Britain could do far more by actively promoting the talks, and I'm pleased you brought in the question of education and the way young people are brought up. And I hope any final agreement on a federal type of state in Cyprus includes an education system and a teaching system that encourages all young people all across Cyprus to have broadly similar values about the island on which they live, because that surely has to be the way forward. Now, I'm not suggesting Britain should be occupying a military role in this. I don't think there's going to be a military solution to this. What I do think is Britain could and should put far more pressure on Turkey over the withdrawal of Turkish troops and over the approach that Erdogan has taken on when he said that, for example, and I'm quoting from something I've got in front of me here, Erdogan declared that a federal solution to be a waste of time. Well, that is completely at odds with everything that's been agreed up till now. And it's the fundamental change in the Turkish position at the moment that's the difficulty. And if Britain was much stronger in challenging the Turkish government on this, I think we'd get a lot further down the line. The European Union accepted Cyprus into membership, knowing full well that it was accepting into membership an island that was divided. It also in open talks with Turkey as a candidate member of the European Union, knowing full well that you could not have Turkish membership of the European Union without an agreement as to how you settle Cyprus in the long term. I suspect that Turkish aspirations to join the European Union are probably reduced a great deal now, because I don't get the impression that Erdogan's foreign policy has that in mind. He seems much more interested in activities in North Africa, in Libya, as well as exploring for oil and gas off the coast of Cyprus. Now, that has been, I think, one of the problems. And so my view is that Britain should have been far more assertive, both with Turkey and at the UN on this. Obviously, Britain is no longer a member of the European Union, but does have a quite complicated structure of relationships and committees between Britain and the European Union, which have to meet regularly, both at a parliamentary level and a government level and at a civil society level, in order to maintain a meaningful political and trade relationship with the European Union. So that is another place that the issues could be brought up.
Do you think that the British should give up their bases in Cyprus? Jeremy? Yes. I just want to follow, and then I'll come back to Niyazi. Jeremy, do you think the British should give up their bases in Cyprus? I mean, the Spanish military should withdraw. Should the British?
It is not. I personally this is personal to me. It is not the policy of the British government and not the policy of the Labour Party, but it is my view that I would rather we didn't have those bases and didn't have that presence there, because I think it would help, but it's got to be linked to Turkish withdrawal as well. But that is a personal view. That is not the view of the Labour Party. It's not the view of the British government. They see them, which is what they are, as sovereign bases on the island of Cyprus. And so they are, in effect, sovereign from Cyprus in law. I would like to see a demilitarization of the Eastern Mediterranean, not a remilitarization of the Eastern Mediterranean. There's enough conflict already and enough arms and enough troops all over the Eastern Mediterranean. I don't know if Niyazi has a view on this and what Akel's position is on this. I'd be interested to hear it.
Well, of course. I mean, of course, with Cypriots, with vast majority, we don't want to have a colonial legacy and a military bases in our country, which I consider as unacceptable from any point. We want a demilitarized Cyprus, and definitely we don't want to have sovereign British bases on the island. So, and also I consider this, of course, as a colonial legacy, which was dictated upon Cyprus once upon a time. And it's about time, of course, we talk about these colonial legacies. Of course, Cyprus has been traumatized from British colonialism. Now we are, for example, talking about two-state solution, but don't forget that first who named two separate self-determination rights in Cyprus was, for example, the Minister for Colonies, Lennox Boyd, in 1956. And that's where we had these two separate states, even from there onwards, which was within the realm of British divide and rule policies. But I don't want to go into this politics, history analysis here. I'm expecting, of course, British government as a guarantor power to play a very positive role in search for a solution. I think it's for everyone's interest to have in Cyprus a united island away from clashes and away from soldiers and armies. So we have to work on this, and I hope now this. I know that the British diplomacy lately has been active again in Cyprus conflict. I know that the British diplomacy is trying to bring some ideas to help somehow to this 5+1 conference, but I am really not sure that some ideas which I heard from British side. I'm saying I heard because there is nothing written from British side, but there are some talking, like some British ideas has been orally presented to the sides. I hope that these are towards the correct direction, because not all ideas can really help. I mean, for example, I heard about 2 community states kind of models within United Cyprus, which I think it doesn't help much. But I don't have a concrete now idea in front of me to see what really British diplomacy is doing nowadays. But I hope British diplomacy can convince 2 sides for 2 different issues. And I think these are keys, 2 keys of solution. And everyone should be aware of it, also British diplomacy, but also EU. One is, there is no way to ignore or to water down the political equality of Turkish Cypriots in a federal state. That should be very clearly said to the Greek Cypriot leadership. A second one is concerning security. One has clearly explained to Turkish side that there is no room for guarantee agreements such as 1960, which allows guarantor powers, even one-sided, to take action. Now, these 2 keys should be considered as the basic keys to open the door for solution in Cyprus. So, acknowledgement of political equality without its and buts and ifs, and acceptance that the guarantee agreement as it is cannot be accepted, and there should be no right to any guarantors for one-sided intervention. That are historically 2 things which are rather creating a problem than solving the problem. And now we should maybe be aware that without solving these 2 issues, we cannot hope for any progress in Cyprus conflict.
Jeremy, would you like to comment on the 2 red lines that Niyazi's drawn for us there in terms of what we need in a bizonal, bifederal state?
I think he makes a good point there, that we do need that, and I'd be interested to know whether he thinks the European Union will play any positive role in this, and what their power is in relation to Turkey, because there was a time when Turkey was pushing very hard to join the EU. I haven't heard too much about that more recently, but I'd be interested in Niyazi's view on that as well. It is a factor in this, albeit Britain is not a member of the EU. But as I said, there are considerable ways in which Britain can operate in tandem with the EU on foreign policy issues, and to some extent does.
Niyazi, would you like to comment on that? Although I think that you raised some interesting points also about Erdogan's realpolitik play. So maybe you'll extend that as well.
Starting by EU. All right, Cyprus joined EU in 2004 as a de facto divided island, and which made no one happy in European Union. No one was really expecting Cyprus to join as a divided island. It was a great disappointment in the European Union then the referendum of 2004, the Greek Cypriot side voted no vote. But don't forget that before this, and this is sometimes something which Turkish side doesn't want to accept, but the fact is that the Annan plan was presented to the sides in 2002 November actually, and Greek Cypriot side was not yet member as Cyprus, as Republic of Cyprus, and they were open to accept or at least to negotiate the Annan Plan. But it was a hardline of Turkish foreign policy and of Denktash, of course, which was saying no to the Annan Plan. So 2002, December in Copenhagen. Then again, before Cyprus signed the accessive agreement, 2003, 17 April in Athens, again Turkish side was saying no to the Annan Plan. So, and actually Turkish Cypriot side voted for the Annan Plan in 2004, a week before Republic of Cyprus was ready to start the membership. And it is very clearly also in Kofi Annan's references that Turkish side came late to say yes to the Annan Plan. So of course, this doesn't mean that I accept that EU couldn't do nothing about it, but EU find itself in front of a de facto situation. Okay, Cyprus became de facto divided member. Now, since then, of course, I can just tell that EU was disappointed, of course, by this development, and I think we didn't see much effort by the EU to involve in the solution of Cyprus conflict. EU definitely tries to help with certain measures, some support to the Turkish Cypriot community, encouraging certain togetherness or cooperation among two sides. But we really, EU is somehow running after UN initiatives, rather itself takes initiative. I think here maybe we should see that how can EU play a bigger role. Now, where are some structural obstacles? First of all, let's be honest, there is no one common united foreign policy in EU. There is no such a thing, EU foreign policy. Second thing is, EU is a club of nation states. There are individual state interests, which of course in Council of European Union is dominated. So a nation state, according to their interests, we are taking positions. So there, we have to understand, EU is not one state, but is a club of sovereign nation states. Sorry, and of course, third thing is, Jeremy mentioned correctly that Turkey, when Turkey was expecting something from EU, like accession talks, was more flexible. But now we have to look into Turkish-EU relations. We are not at the best. I must say, there are a lot of difficulties, and now Turkey's full accession seems very removed in this political atmosphere. But of course, Turkey still is a member. It's a country, a candidate country negotiating for accession, and Turkey has a lot of interest in EU. Also, EU has some interest in Turkey. Now, for example, Turkey wants to update and enlarge the custom union agreement between EU and Turkey. Turkey wants visa liberation. Turkey wants help for the Syrian refugees. All these are in front of the EU. So EU thinks in a way for a positive agenda for Turkey. And to my mind, it's good to have a positive agenda with Turkey. But of course, maybe that, I'm not sure if it's good enough to encourage Turkey really to support a federal settlement in Cyprus. I don't expect this at all. I'm expecting to see more from EU. But as I said, we have some, as EU, we have some weaknesses, structural weaknesses in exercising foreign policy.
We're coming towards the end. We've got our last sort of 5-6 minutes. Jeremy, I'd like to ask you, how do you think we should proceed with what incentives are there for the Republic of Cyprus? Because although they say they want a bi-zonal, bi-federal solution, as Niyazi has pointed out, a lot of observers see a lack of political will to actually make it happen. And that we get let down at the last minute. Do you think that there's any incentive for them for a bi-zonal, common federation?
Yes, I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are incentives, and they are very strong ones. Hang on, let me just reduce my feedback. 1 second. I think there are a number of very good incentives for the people of Northern Cyprus. One is the ability to freely travel around the
People of
island.
Northern Cyprus
The,
have a lot of
the
incentives
second,
for a federal
sorry,
solution.
I didn't
But for
hear
the
your.
South,
Can you hear me now?
yes. What are the incentives for people in the
Yeah, no,
Republic of Cyprus? There are a lot of
I got you.
incentives for people in the unrecognised north.
Yeah,
Because
Alev, I got the
they
question. I'm sorry, it was a technical problem at this end. The incentives for the people of Northern Cyprus: one, an ability to travel all around the island freely; two, a passport that's internationally recognised; the ability to have direct travel to and from Northern Cyprus from all parts of the world. That surely is a step forward. And thirdly, simply to be able to live in one country together, albeit speaking different languages. And that
Jeremy,
surely
we're
is
really
something well
aware.
worth campaigning for.
Jeremy, we're
Huh?
really aware of the incentives for people in the occupied zone to live in it's immensely
Yeah.
difficult to live in the occupied zone. You're cut off from the world. You can't travel at the moment. You
Sure.
can't. You're completely trapped. But what is the incentive for people in the Republic of Cyprus? Because they have a tremendous national wound and sense of injury, and yet it's a very prosperous state, and everything continues as normal. So as Niyazi pointed out earlier, there's kind of a lack of political will to compromise there. How can we work on
Well,
that?
I think the sense of wound is obviously there. The sense of hurt is obviously there, but also the sense that if you have a settlement, then again you can travel freely around the island. And as Niyazi was pointing out earlier, some progress was made on issues of property and ownership, historical sites, artifacts, and so on, all of which are an important part of it. I would have thought the people of all of the people of the Republic of Cyprus would benefit from reunification. And I think there is an incentive, and that is you've put behind you the idea that Nicosia is a divided city, that there's a fence across the island which you cannot cross, and you have to have a UN peacekeeping force there to ensure this rather tense situation isn't allowed to get any worse. I think the incentives and the possibilities and also the ramifications of a settlement in Cyprus would be a big sign across the whole region that it is possible to politically solve problems like this. And I want our government to be a really big part of doing that. And I want to see a demilitarized, bizonal, federal solution that means all of Cyprus is one island.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. We're hoping that we are on the next step to peace. Would you like to say a last word, Niyazi?
My last word, first of all, I underline, and I fully agree with Jeremy Corbyn. There are incentives, many incentives. I name some of them. For example, as military insecurity, economic insecurity, right to have a homeland, a patrie, Cyprus as a whole. And of course, the greatest of all for both communities is the permanent peace. This is exactly where we have to look at. Federal state equals with permanent peace. And we should never ignore the fact that this is the greatest benefit ever for us in Cyprus, which will be secured by a federal state in Cyprus. Thank you.
Well, it's been a real pleasure to speak with the former leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, and as I say, MP since 1983, so knows the Cypriot community well. And we hope that these informal talks will be another step forward, and that we will be one step closer to peace on our island. I hope this programme has been informative and you've had a sense of the European and British perspectives on what is to come. Any